Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. My name is Leah, and I'm with Marzocco Home. I'm here in Seattle along with the rest of the team, except for one. So you may see on the chat that I have Dave, Zach, Ben, Chris, and Scott. Those are the other members of the small but mighty Marzocco Home team. So we are going to be diving into Latte Art basics today, and they're going to be helping out in the chat feature while I'm talking, doing some demonstration, and otherwise trying to manage this live Zoom thing up here. So if you have any questions for the Q&A, which will be the last half an hour of this class today, definitely pop it into the chat. Try to note that it is a question for the Q&A. I know there's a lot of people saying hello, which is wonderful to see from all over the world. But just type question, big bold letters, and then whatever your question is. And in the last half, I'll be doing my best to answer those in real time. I find that's the most valuable part for me because I get to be in dialogue with you instead of monologuing. So definitely super excited to be here with you today. The very first thing that I want to say is if you are an essential worker right now during COVID-19 and you took the time to be here, you were able to have the time to be here, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. If you're working at a grocery store, if you're a doctor, a nurse, if you're delivering groceries, if you're cleaning places so people can go to work in a sanitized environment, it just means so much that you're out there doing that. And I hope that if you are into coffee, this is a small gift to you. And anyone who's staying home, thank you so much for staying home, and thank you for just get rid of something on my screen there. Thank you so much for staying home, and thank you for taking time in your morning to appreciate the ritual of coffee. I think for whoever you are, whatever your circumstances are, coffee can be something that brings us all together and is a moment of sanity in a sometimes unstable world at the moment. So thank you so much for being here. We're going to do this a little different than the last few classes for several reasons. The first is that halfway through, I'm going to play a video, and it's going to show you some of the latte art pours that we're talking about. It's a video that I created specifically for this event. So it's tailored to the things that we'll be talking about. That is because I don't have an expansive camera crew here or anything. It's just me and my laptop. So it's hard to get those angles. And the angles are really what you need to see to be able to understand the movements of the pitcher and what you need to do to be able to pour latte art. If anyone wants to see me demo live latte art, I will do my best to get that on camera for sure. But there will also be a video so you get those angles. And then at the end of class, we're gonna have a couple polls. Polls are different than the Q&A. It's gonna pop up on your screen with a question. Feel free to participate or not, it's completely anonymous and they're just fun questions. And then we're gonna answer based on the majority of what you select. So just keep an eye out for that. That'll happen in the later part of the class. So to get started, for Marzocco here at Marzocco Home, latte art is definitely the thing we get asked about the most. It's what people want to know. How do I pour latte art? And if you've been in my previous classes, milk steaming basics and espresso basics, then I would definitely say that you're in a good place to start learning about latte art. If you haven't taken those classes before, or maybe you're just saying like, oh, I'm never getting good latte art, but I want to take this class, but I haven't watched the milk steaming, I would recommend starting with the milk steaming basics class and then revisiting this. Because you can't get good latte art without steaming your milk properly. And I go a little bit more in depth into that in my milk steaming basics class for sure. But pouring latte art is super fun. It's why people ask about it all the time. It's why people want to know. It's like what kind of makes it addicting. You pull a really good shot of espresso, you steam really good milk, and then you want to finish it. And there's always something that you can do a little bit better each and every time. But latte art is, it's just a visual thing. It doesn't taste like anything. So starting out with a really good shot of espresso, a pitcher of milk that you've steamed really well, to me, that's the most important part. And then the latte art is sort of the cherry on top. It's just the nice little touch that shows that you put care and attention into the beverage that you are making. So today I'm going to be using the Marzocco pitcher. So this pitcher is a small one, it's 12 ounces, and it's meant to go in conjunction with a smaller size cup. So this cup is about 6 or 7 ounces. It's a standard, quote unquote standard, insofar as there is a standard cappuccino size. And that's what I prefer to practice with. When I go into the video, I'll talk a little bit about practicing with water. Whatever you use the most frequently, whatever your favorite cup is and whatever your favorite pitcher is, when you practice, use the things that you will then use in real time. When I played sports, my coach used to say, practice how you will play. So you want to make sure that you're using your favorite cup and whatever pitcher you use most often, because so much of this is going to be muscle memory. So you're really learning the steps of the dance. It's one thing to say, you know, steam milk or like watch someone dance and then to try to do it yourself. You have to really break it down into steps to be able to troubleshoot how to be better and maybe what went wrong. So today, the water technique that I'm going to demonstrate in the video is going to give you the steps of the dance, so to speak, so you are able to troubleshoot the things that will make your latte art better overall. So this is the cup that I'm using. I'm going to hold it in my non-dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so in this case, I'm going to hold it in my left hand. Any lefties out there, just reverse it, I'm sorry. But I'm going to be holding my cup in my left hand and my pitcher in my right hand. When you're holding your pitcher, there's lots of different ways to hold pitchers. So that's kind of a matter of debate out there. I will show you what works best for me, and then I would say figure out what works best for you. Maybe there's a couple other sources that have a different pitcher hold that works best. It's pretty highly personal. So what works for me is I just hold it loosely in a couple fingers, and then I have my thumb on top. And then I'm using my 2 fingers at the bottom to sort of stabilize as I'm pouring. So just a really nice loose hold. I'm not gripping it like this because that will make my wrist a little too stiff when I go to pour those other designs. I want it to be nice and loose. So I have this full range of motion with my wrist. And then my cup, I'm going to hold in my left hand like Spider-Man. I call it Spider-Man grip. So in the tips of my fingers, so I can move it however way I want without it slipping out of my fingers. I'm not holding it in my palm like this. One, if you're serving this to someone else, your fingers are close to where they'll be drinking, which isn't ideal. And 2, it's kind of hot. There's espresso in there, you're putting hot milk in there. So if you're holding it like this and you have sensitive hands, there's a chance that it might become uncomfortable for you to continue holding it. And if you're thinking about how much your hand is uncomfortable, you're not going to be focusing on your latte art. So for me, this is a really great learner hold, holding it from your fingertips. And the other thing to note is I'm also going to have the handle pointed towards my body. So it's here, but it's actually pointed towards my body, like a straight line coming out from my body. That is because the latte art is completely visual. So the visual aspect of latte art, it's all aesthetics. And so it being centered in the cup becomes part of how enjoyable it is. So by having the handle pointed towards my body, I'm going to pour with my pitcher in a horizontal line across my body. So insofar as this is going straight out, my pitcher is going to go straight across. It forms an axis, and that's going to center the design in the cup. So when I serve it and I hand it to you, you're going to be drinking with the design facing towards you. So it's going to be really beautiful and centered. If I had it so the design, maybe the top of the heart was by the handle and the point was down here, it just wouldn't be quite as pleasing. So for me, if you have a handled cup, having it facing towards you and then pouring across your body like that is going to be key. So those are the major factors for the hold today. I don't go into that as much with the video. And then practicing with water, I like doing that because we all know milk is expensive, coffee is expensive. So the value of practicing with water, as you're going to see, is really you're just training your hands to know what to do. It's just practice again and again and again. You're teaching your body what to do so your brain doesn't have to think so much about it. So your brain can just get out of the way and focus maybe on steaming good milk, the design itself, what you want to pour. So you're not so worried about the mechanics of it. So I recommend using the water technique in the morning, maybe pouring a couple times back and forth before actually pouring latte art. So that being said, I'm going to launch into the video now. So this will explain the water technique, and it's also going to go over 2 pours, pouring a heart and pouring a tulip. So those are the 2 most common designs, and I'll describe them just a bit in the video, but those are my favorite starter designs. I personally have a preference for tulips. I know some people out there love pouring hearts of all types, rippled, layered, whatever you have. And then there's some people that have an affinity for rosettas. But today we're going to focus on the heart and the tulip, as I think those are the most, lend themselves best to learning. So bear with me as I get the video started here. I'm going to stop my video and then I'm going to switch you over.
Welcome to Latte Art Basics with Marzocco Home. First up, we are going to practice with some water. It's less expensive than practicing with milk, less wasteful than practicing with coffee. And we're going to fill the pitcher 3/4 full with water to simulate steamed milk. and we're going to go through the movements of latte art. Learning the movements of latte art is important insofar as you're teaching your body the steps to the dance, right? Anything you do with your hand, you need to practice. Practice makes perfect. Practicing these steps is going to help you be more fluid when it comes time to actually pour. So I've got my pitcher in my right hand, which is my dominant hand, and my cup in my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand. And I'm going to start with step 1, high and slow. To practice this movement, just focus on pouring a pencil's width stream of water to the center of the cup. Your pitcher is about 1 inch away from the top of your cup, and you're just pouring a pencil's width stream of water. You're maintaining that flow rate. So as your pitcher is getting more empty, you're tilting it more forward, so that way your stream isn't stopping and starting or stuttering. When you're done, pour your cup to the side of the pitcher, get rid of that water back into the pitcher, maybe have a towel down. You'll notice I spill quite a bit in this video. And then try again. Again, I'm just pouring a pencil's width stream to the center of the cup, and you'll see me going in small circles. We'll talk a little bit more about why this step is important later in the video, but this is the first step for your water practice, just maintaining that constant stream about 1 inch away from the top of your cup. Practice that a few times, see how that treats you, focusing just on maintaining a consistent stream. It's harder than it looks. The next step we're going to practice is step 2, low and fast. Low and fast is where the latte art actually happens. This is where we use the foamy part of our milk to skate across the surface of the espresso, like skipping a stone across water. So the low and fast practice for you is pouring twice as fast as you were before to the center of the cup, so the stream is 2 pencils widths wide. So you're pouring, it's a pretty aggressive pour, and you start out with your cup tilted. As it gets more full, you're straightening your cup out. And that's pretty difficult. And you're really focusing on getting your spout close to the surface of the cup, almost in the cup. Here's a real-time version so you can see about how fast I'm talking. Pretty aggressive pour. So go ahead and practice that a few times, pouring directly to the center of the cup with your cup tilted, twice as fast as you were before, straightening out as it fills, all the way to the top. That's low and fast, step 2. So step 3 is strike through. You won't actually see a strike through here, but this is an important movement to practice to get to your strike through. And that's going to go up and down while maintaining a constant flow rate. So anytime you're up, you straighten your cup out. Anytime you're down, you tilt your cup towards your pitcher. Up and down is the movement you can practice to help you with your strike through. So practice that up and down a few times, and then we'll get to the actual strike through. So what is a strike through? Well, you're about to see one. It's the very end step of your design. So up and through. That movement there is your strike through. It happens at the end of your pour. You go straight up and across your body in a parallel line, away from where you started pouring. So straight up and then go through, creating a 90-degree angle. It's not up while going forward, it's up and then moving forward. That's an important point. So let's put it all together. Steps 1 through 3. Our old friend high and slow, pouring 1 inch above the cup, about a pencil's width wide, consistent stream. We're just trying to raise the level of the espresso. When the cup's half full, we're going to sink down to our low and fast, about twice as fast. And then when it's full, we pick up and strike through. Again, from a different angle, we are pouring high and slow. When the cup's about half full, we're going to sink down to low and fast, then pick up and strike through. So that's it, folks. That's the water technique. Practice makes perfect. Practicing these movements you're going to see in the coming video will make a lot more sense when you see it in context with latte art, but this is an easy and cheap way for you to practice. So let's see start to finish what creating latte art looks like, from pulling your shot to steaming milk, because latte art does not taste like anything, as people like to say. And it's true. It's just the cherry on top of a perfectly crafted beverage. It shows that you created something hopefully as beautiful as it is delicious. So first things first, you'll pull your shot of espresso. I'm using Stamp Act coffee. They're based here out of Seattle, Washington. I'm using their old school espresso blend, pretty delicious. And I'm going to use a 1-to-2 ratio. So pretty standard ratio. I have a 17-gram basket. I'm putting 16.7 grams in, and then I'm going to use a scale to weigh my output, which will be about twice as much, around 34 grams of espresso or so. If you're interested in learning more about ratios or anything that I just said, head over to our YouTube channel, La Marzocco Home YouTube channel, and check out the Espresso Basics Live that we did, where I go more in depth into how to create a recipe for your espresso, why it's important, what might taste good. But definitely take the time to dial in your espresso before worrying about latte basis for your beverage. Now we're going to steam some milk. For this demonstration, I'll be using whole milk, homogenized whole milk. You use your hand to test the temperature. I'm shooting for somewhere around 135 to 140 degrees for this. When it gets too hot to touch, I'll go ahead and turn it off. And again, if you're interested in learning more about milk steaming, head to our milk steaming basics class on our YouTube channel. It was a live event that we did a few weeks ago, where I go more in depth about how to achieve the right texture and temperature, which again is the only way you're going to get good latte art is if you steam your milk properly. So before you can run, you've got to walk, right? So you've got to pull your good shot of espresso and steam your milk properly. You see here I have microfoam and 135 degrees, which is plenty for a smaller beverage, which I'm going to be pouring about a 6 or 7 ounce drink. So let's pour some latte art. We've done all that work. Let's have some fun. So here we are with the old standard, the heart, a cup full of love. You can see there it is a simple shape, and the strike through is what actually turns it into a heart. Otherwise, it would be called a monk's head, which is a different latte art style. So here we are pouring a heart, and let's go back to our old friend, high and slow. We're just trying to raise the surface of the espresso closer to the top of the cup. When it's halfway full, we sink down to low and fast. And for a heart, you hang out in that one spot the entire time. You pick up and you strike through in that same spot. So for a heart, it's really critical that you drop down to the center when you do low and fast. So here I'm in high and slow again. I'm waiting for that espresso to get halfway up to the surface of the cup, top of the cup. And when it's halfway full, I tilt the cup towards my pitcher, sink down, get my spout nice and close, and then I stay in one spot the entire time, pick straight up from that spot, and then move the spout across for the strike through. The low and fast is how you create your latte art. So here's a real-time pour, so you can see the actual speed at which I'm pouring. So it's a little bit faster, right? So I'm high and slow. I'm gonna sink down low and fast. It's gonna happen pretty fast. I'm picking up and striking through. You may have noticed that when I was in the low and fast, I wiggled just a little bit, which is how you get those lines in your heart. You don't have to wiggle when you do the low and fast. You can just stay strong in one spot. The wiggling for me is just a habit. So low and fast, that's where I'm kind of shaking the pitcher. That's how you get those lines, picking up and striking through. And there you have your heart. So let's try something new. Let's try our Tulip. These are my favorite pours. And everything is the same with the exception of this low and fast. That's what we're changing to get a different design, is we're doing different things in the low and fast. And you can see there, it wasn't just one shape I was creating, it was 4 shapes. We call those tiers in Tulip, so a 4-tiered Tulip. So let's see it from this angle. So for my Tulip, I'm still gonna start out high and slow, but I'm not gonna spend as much time in this area. I actually need more space in my cup to make the design, so I'm gonna sink down to low and fast a little bit sooner, when my cup is less than half full. And I started by creating a blob like I would with the heart, but then I picked up, moved my spout back, and then went down again. So it's sort of repeating the low and fast movement several times while moving backwards in your cup to create shapes. It's also important to note that I'm not striking through each of my tiers. I'm creating separate blobs and striking through just at the end one time. So let's see that again. High and slow, spending less time here, only making the cup about less than half full, getting my spout nice and close, creating my first layer, pulling up and moving back. Second layer, pulling up and moving back. Third layer, pulling up and moving back. Little fourth one. Here's a fifth one. And now I pick straight up and strike through. It's a common beginner's mistake that I see them try to strike through each of the layers as they're pouring. You only want to do that once. So here's a real-time, real speed pour. You can see it's going to happen a lot faster. I'm sinking down. I'm only spending 1, 2, 3, maybe seconds creating the base. And then each successive tier that I create, I'm only spending maybe a second in the low and fast to create the blob. Another beginner's mistake that I see is you'll get fixated on the pretty white foam coming out and you'll hang out in that one spot for too long, and then you run out of room in your cup to be able to create more than 1 or 2 tiers. So it's quick little scooping up, moving back, scooping up, moving back movements and that playing with that speed will allow you to create multiple tiers, maybe 20 tiers, maybe 25 tiers, 5 tiers, 6 tiers, 3 tiers, as many tiers in your tulip as you want. But playing with the speed of that low and fast and that scooping back movement, that's how you create a many tiered or a few tiered tulip, is just by adjusting the speed at which you're doing that step. All right, well, thank you all so much for becoming latte art experts with me. Or maybe not, maybe you have more questions, but hopefully I answered some of your questions that you had at the start of this video. The other questions that maybe I didn't address, or the new ones that popped up while you were watching this, I'm going to be very excited to answer in the Q&A portion of our virtual learning class immediately following this video. So thank you so much for watching. And if I can leave you with just one thing, it's that pouring latte art is fun. So have fun with it. Be kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself. You're learning. Learning as an adult is challenging to the ego, to say the least. So the fact that you're putting yourself out there and you're trying something different is huge. So allow yourself a little bit of joy every morning. Practice your latte art. Laugh at the abstract art, and celebrate your successes of your hearts and your tulips and your future rosettas, and send them to me. I'd love to see them.
All right, let's get out of this video here. And I'm back in real time. All right, I hope that video was helpful for you. I spent some time making it this week to try and show off the different angles. If it wasn't, or if you have more questions, I definitely am excited to get to those now in the Q&A. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch that. I just got a question, Ben sent me a question saying, does my cat like hearts or tulips more? I would assume tulips, because that was the part of the video she wanted to hang out in, but probably, judging by her discerning character, she's probably a Rosetta person, but you never know. Okay, so we're gonna hop into the Q&A now. So if you have questions, please shoot them to the chat, and then I will be trying to address them in real time. Ben has already gathered some of your questions, so I'll get started here. This is a good one. How tall should we fill our pitchers? So before you pour latte art, you're steaming milk, right? And so you need to know how much milk to actually put in, because putting in too much or too little would pretty much tank your chances of getting latte art. So you need to start off with really the right amount of milk. It's based on your pitcher size. This is a 12-ounce pitcher, and it has this spout here, and it's just a pinky's width below or so, or right up into this line here, if you can see that. These La Marzocco pitchers are really nice because they have milk measurements on the inside, so it takes the guesswork out of it, so you can actually pick a line based on the cup that you're pouring into. That's the right volume. The ideal volume is when you're finishing your design, you're almost completely out of milk. You still have a little bit in your pitcher, but you don't have a ton left over. If you have too much, you're gonna wash out your design. And if you have too little, it's gonna get too foamy and it's just gonna kind of dump out in a block. So that was a great question of how much milk to start with first. So let's see what other questions. So high and low step, I noticed Leah didn't tilt the cup when pouring the milk. Is this recommended rather than tilting the cup when pouring the milk? So I'm not sure exactly what part of the video that was, but let me address that. Tilting the cup is actually super critically important. So if I have a shot of espresso in this cup as it is right now, and I go to pour my latte art, and I start out high and slow, sometimes I don't tilt the cup in the high and slow portion. I'll just kind of have it, on a level field here. And then when I sink down, that's when I'll tilt the cup. And the reason that I tilt the cup when I sink down is because I need to get this spout pretty much in the cup. The way that I like to think about it is this is your pencil and the surface of your espresso is your paper, and you can't write unless those two things are pretty much touching. Not like digging into the espresso itself, but right at the surface of the espresso. And I can't do that if my cup is level, because I literally can't get my spout into where the espresso is. I would have to wait until it was almost completely full and then try to do my design. And that's where you end up with tiny little blobs. So I don't know where I missed the tilt, but you can start out in the high and slow by having your cup tilted. It's your preference. Sometimes I start out straight and then I tilt as I go down. And then anytime my pitcher goes up, I straighten my cup out. So that's my own personal how I do it. But some people do start out with the cup tilted. So they don't, that's one less thing they have to think about. I like to think that these two things are kind of on a string, like a seesaw. So anytime I'm down, it's tilted, and anytime I'm up, the cup is straight. But those are the kind of nuances that you'll develop something for yourself in your own latte art practice. So really great question. Awesome. All right, let's see who else. Lots of questions about tilting the cup and pitcher explanation. Yeah, so I'll kind of keep touching on that because later in when we do our poll, we're going to ask some questions about what's occurring. But tilting the cup is one of the main ways you're not getting latte art, is you're not tilting your cup, and you're also not getting your spout close enough because you're stopping as soon as your pitcher hits. You think that that's close enough, but in fact, if you watch just this tip right here, you need to actually have a much more aggressive pour, and that happens when the cup is tilted. It allows you to get in there and start pouring sooner. All right, let's see other questions. Pitcher tip differences. So I get that a lot. Does my pitcher make a difference? There are about 100+ pitchers out there on the market right now, each with some special feature, new feature that's supposedly going to make you a better latte artist or a better this or that, or some are legitimately, they have specific shapes to make certain kinds of designs. So it is a personal preference, 100%. It's like anything that if you play baseball, you might have a specific kind of bat or brand of bat that you like to hit with versus something else because it feels good to you and it makes sense to you. To me, that is how I feel about pitchers. I tend to like these all-purpose pitchers that are stainless steel so I can test the temperature with my hand. It doesn't have any kind of like fancy leather wrap that prevents me from seeing what in real time with my hand what the temperature is. It has a pretty all-purpose spout. So you can see it's not completely blunted, but it's not sharp and pointy like a true like bird beak. Then it has just a slight slope. So it's not completely straight. It has just a slight dip off. That just is a very versatile pitcher that you can use for pretty much anything. There are lots of pitchers out there that have different types of spouts, different angles. Unless you're pouring competitively, those become less valuable to you as a home barista. I would say whatever pitcher you use that you like to use is the best pitcher, because that's going to be the one that you have the most fun using, and so you'll be less frustrated. So I tend to think that something like this is going to be super helpful, just an all-purpose pitcher. And then my other recommendation is if you're like me and you want to try out all the gear, and I have like a cupboard full of pitchers right now, that can be fun, but if you're going to try to be consistent, use the same pitcher every single day until you get good latte art. Because if you switch around from tool to tool, it's always going to be slightly different, and you're never going to be quite sure if it was you or the pitcher or the cup that you were pouring into. So just try to be consistent as you're learning, and then as you get more versatile, you can branch out. So a really great question. All right. So I mentioned that a pitcher needs to be filled just right for a pour. Does this mean that you should steam fresh for each cup, steaming once for 2 cups with a larger pitcher? Let me see, make sure I finish that. Yes, so I never re-steam milk, ever. It's sort of like if you were to take, so if I had, maybe I poured my latte art and I had a little bit of milk left that was steamed, and then I poured cold milk on top, and then I went to steam it again. It would be like if I had cooked steak and I threw it into a pan with raw steak. It doesn't make any sense because part of it will be overcooked and the other part will be undercooked, and it's just not going to be very good or have the texture that I need. So by starting with a clean pitcher with fresh cold milk, alternative or dairy milk, every single time is going to give you really consistent results. That being said, if I wanted to steam for, say, 2 of these little guys, I could use a slightly bigger pitcher. So this is my smaller pitcher. This is what I would use for like a single serve cup, or I could do 2 small like macchiatos with this cup. But if I wanted to pour 2 like 6 or 7 ounce drinks, I could use this larger pitcher. This is a 20 ounce pitcher. And I would still fill up to like right to this spout here. And I would steam for it. And then there's two ways that you could do it. You could just use this pitcher and try to pour two designs, but you're not going to have really good results because your first cup is going to have a lot of heavy liquidy milk, and your second cup is going to have a lot of foam because there's two types of steam milk in your pitcher, and so one cup will have more than the other. So what I like to do is steam in a big pitcher like this, and then I put a little bit of hot water in this pitcher to pre-warm it and then dump it out. And then I swirl my milk and I'll pour some of that steamed milk into this pitcher to simulate steamed milk. So just right up to this line, as it would be if it was steamed. And then I pour my design. And that ends up being the right mix of foam. And then I can pour with both pitchers. It's called batching. They do that a lot in commercial places. If you have at home two pitchers of different sizes, or it would even work if you had two big pitchers. It just matters that you have two pitchers and one big enough to actually steam for two small beverages. So I hope that answers your question there. Okay, so for those with single boiler machines, does the order of making espresso and steaming milk make a difference in latte art? I usually steam first. So that makes a huge difference. So in the video, I pulled my shot first and then I steamed milk. For La Marzocco machines, they are dual boiler, so you can actually do both at the same time. So you don't have to do them separately. But the reality for a lot of people is they do have to do it separately because they have a single boiler machine, meaning they can't pull a shot and steam milk at the same time. My recommendation is always pull your shot first and then steam milk. If you're putting espresso into milk, as espresso sits, it does lose some sweetness, but when you put it into milk, the milk kind of adds sweetness back in and it masks some of the imperfections that have been created by it sitting and waiting for the milk to be steamed. If you were to reverse it and steam your milk first and then pull your shot, the milk degrades very quickly. Last week I talked about there being the two textures in steamed milk and how it's constantly pulling itself apart. It's getting slightly more foamy and slightly more liquidy, and it's separating as soon as you're done steaming it. So it has more to lose if you steam that first. So my recommendation is pull your shot first and then steam your milk and use your milk right away. You're gonna have better results for latte art for sure. So that was a really great question. All right. Does the crema of espresso get in the way of latte art? If so, what can I do about it? Crema with latte art, that's the tan foam that's on top of espresso. That's what gives you your contrast, right? There's the brown ring and then there's the white design in the center. Crema can make a huge difference in your latte art because especially now super light roasts are very popular and you get a much lighter crema, and so your latte art ends up looking a lot more washed out. Typically darker roasts tend to give you the most contrast because they're darker and they have a little bit more crema, and so you end up with something that looks really beautiful and has a lot of contrast. That being said, the other thing to consider with crema is if you pull your shot directly into your cup, you're going to have you're going to have stratified layers. So there's going to be sort of a layer of crema on top that's just gas and fat. And if you try to pour into that without swirling the espresso or mixing the espresso, you're going to have an inconsistent canvas. It's like the espresso is your canvas and it has splotches all over it. You want it to be nice, smooth, and uniform. So you always want to swirl your espresso to incorporate the crema. So it's more of a homogeneous liquid when you go to pour your design. The other side of that is if your espresso is super old and you don't have any crema, like there's no like gas or like tan layer on top, it's going to be a lot harder for you to get a really good latte art design. You might be able to get something, but again, it's going to look washed out because there's not going to be any like, brown foam around the edges. And so it's kind of going to look watery and get away from you a bit. All right, so we are going to launch a poll. This poll is troubleshooting latte art. So if you feel like it, it's anonymous. What have you been trying at home and what has been happening? What have you been seeing in the cup? Are you not getting any design at all when you try? Is it just looking like Rorschach test, abstract art? Is the design not centered in the cup? Is the milk very stiff and foamy or pouring out in one big blob? Is there no contrast? Do you have a tiny little design, or do you have a huge design that you can't control? And I'll address the most popular. So leave it up for a second, give you all a chance to vote. Maybe I'll address the top two because I think it's worth addressing all of these, honestly, if we had the time. Okay, so let's go ahead and end the poll and then we'll share it. So number one is abstract art. That's, I think, everyone's favorite, is they say, it kind of looks like, it's like looking at clouds. It kind of looks like a goat or an apple or an onion. So the abstract art thing really comes down to not knowing what it is that you're doing when you're pouring, or not having the framework to diagnose what is happening. Usually what ends up happening is people see, they watch the videos and then they go to try it and everything happens much faster than they thought it would. So let me get that out of the way there. So if you're getting abstract designs, I would recommend revisiting that water technique and thinking about, as you're pouring your latte art design, each of those steps, high and slow, what's happening here? When I'm in low and fast, am I all of a sudden moving really quickly? How is my cup tilted like this when I start down? And then do I gradually untilt it, or do I leave it tilted the entire time? Did I never tilt it? You can start to kind of troubleshoot and nitpick what's going on and make a shape. Because once you know the why of it, or what it is that you're doing, you're gonna have a much better idea of how to fix it. The other thing that I see with the abstract art is the crazy, I'm making wiggles, I'm pouring, I'm so excited. Especially with hearts, it's all about standing strong in one spot. Tulips, you're creating a design, you're scooping back, and rosettas, obviously you have the wiggle. Rosettas are the fern-like shape. But a lot of people, they get down to the low and fast, and then they start going like this, because they're just excited and they want the foam to come out. Or maybe they're having a hard time getting the foam to come out, and so they're like shaking the pitcher to try to get it out. My recommendation is to focus on the angle of your spout and the angle of your cup more than you focus on the wiggle. And once you can consistently get blobs to come out, or shapes to come out, then start to incorporate just a gentle wiggle. That small movement that I'm making, that is more than enough to get really beautiful fine lines in your design. It's not like this with a stiff wrist. It's just a gentle, it's more like you're shaking the pitcher, or like letting the pitcher rock back and forth, than it is that you're actually shaking the pitcher. I like to think about it like, I don't know, skateboard half pipe. I'm encouraging the milk to kind of rock back and forth like waves. And so the milk itself is what's moving, not my pitcher. So I'm just gently encouraging it to build momentum, and then it creates those ripples. So one of the other things, the second one that I saw in that poll was people saying their milk is too stiff and foamy and it comes out in one big blob. If you haven't watched the Milk Steaming Basics, definitely revisit, but I will say that I'm using whole milk. I'm using Organic Valley whole milk for those demonstrations. Whole milk gives you the best blend of fat and protein to be able to pour latte art consistently. That being said, a lot of people are saying, well, but I don't use whole milk. Like, I don't want to use whole milk, I use 2%. So if you're using 2% or 1%, or especially skim, my tip to you is, once you go back and watch that Milk Basics video, when you're adding air, the adding air portion, you just need to do that a heck of a lot less, because it just textures right away. So you don't need to spend as much time in the adding air to your milk portion at all. So if it's coming out in one big blob and you feel like you want to experiment with whole milk, that would be my suggestion, is to try it with whole milk and see if you get better results. If you're saying, no, I want to stick to my skim or my 2%, then definitely play around with the length of aeration, because that's going to help keep the foam from separating into a big stiff blob. Because when I hear people saying it's coming out in one big blob, that to me means it's too foamy, or there's a little bit too much air that's been added. So great question with that. So one question, how did you learn? Did you figure this all out on your own? I was a commercial barista. I worked in a cafe, and multiple cafes. I started in Minneapolis and then made my way to Seattle. Was lucky enough to get a job with La Marzocco, working at the La Marzocco Cafe. And literally just hours and hours of practice that I was lucky enough to be paid for, because I love to do it. So I was just, it's like a video game. Each time you pour latte art, you'll think, oh, I can do it better. I can do it again. I'm going to try it again. And working professionally allowed me to do that. But that being said, it's also just, I went out and I talked to people who knew how to do it, and I heard it from multiple different people. So if I'm not making a ton of sense right now, or if what I'm saying isn't resonating with you, I would recommend going out and finding other resources on the internet. Our blog posts are really informative to me at home.marzocco.usa. You can find our blog posts. They have more in-depth information about pouring latte art and things like that. But just like with anything, it was just persistence and patience and really good, kind people showing me how to do it. So if you do learn something from this and you go on to pour a harder tulip, my task for you, if I can assign one, is to show someone else, because that's how the community of coffee spreads, is just a bunch of really interested, kind people sort of sharing their knowledge. So great question. All right, so about 2,000 questions about alternative milks and pouring differences. So alternative milks could and may be its own class, because it's a slightly different situation altogether. The steaming of alternative milks is highly dependent on the type of alternative milk that you use. So I can't just say alternative milks and have it be a blanket statement, because soy steams very differently than almond. Almond steams very differently than oat, so on and so forth. So it's almost like we would need to spend time in each one. But I will say a slightly cooler temp than regular whole milk. So I would say instead of steaming to 140, steaming to like 130 or 135, you're going to have slightly better results with your foam, a longer lasting foam, and you don't need to aerate quite as much. Similar to 2% or skim, if you add a ton of air, it's going to get really blocky and separate really quickly. So you just want to add tiny little bursts of air, just a little less than you would do with your normal dairy milk. And the other for pouring alternative milks is they tend to be a lot more watery. So it's like painting with watercolor instead of painting with oil. They want to get away from you in the cup. They kind of like don't follow the normal rules insofar as there are any. So I would recommend slowing down when you pour. Instead of, maybe you can knock off some really quick designs with dairy milk. But when you go to pour your alternative milk, my recommendation is to just do it a lot slower, because it's a little bit more liquidy, and so your movements have a bigger impact. So a small movement with alternative milk may send it to all sides of the cup in a way that it wouldn't with dairy. So when you're in your low and fast, to just slow it down a little bit more and be a little bit more intentional. So great question. All right. About a ton about pouring latte art in smaller drinks. So smaller drinks are one of my favorite things to pour. This is a Gibraltar glass. Some people call it a cortado. Other people call it a Gibraltar. Some people call it piccolo. There's a million names for something that is smaller than a cappuccino, but not quite a macchiato size, which is just 2 ounces of espresso with a little bit of steamed milk. So how do I go from pouring something like this, which has a very nice round shape and is really wide and allows me a lot of room, to pouring into something like this, which has a very small circular base and then mostly straight up and down sides, and it's just a very small target? Well, the volume of your milk comes into play. So with these pitchers, I can't steam less than a pinky's width below, because if you watch the milk steaming basics video, I talk about that a little bit more, but you'll scald the milk and it'll cook too quickly. So then you'll end up with the wrong texture and the wrong temperature. So with these smaller drinks, there is a little bit of waste involved, because even though I'm pouring something small like this, I still need a certain amount of milk in this pitcher. And this is one of the smaller pitchers that I found. I've never used anything smaller than this. This is 12 ounces. I'm sure they exist. But in my experience, I will steam just below my pinky. So there's the spout, and then my pinky is right below. So I'll fill up right to that line. I'll steam as normal. And then before I pour, maybe this would be a good time to make 2 drinks so you can share. I'll pour just a little bit of my milk out so I have less volume, but it's still the right temperature and texture. And then I'll go to pour. Because it's really hard if you have a full pitcher's worth of milk and you go to try to pour one of these, it's going to wash out the design. So my tip is to always, with the smaller drinks, pour a little bit of milk out before you begin to pour, like maybe another pinky's width out for a cortado, and maybe a pinky and a half for a macchiato, because it's going to allow you to get even closer so you can get the spout in the design and actually make a shape. One of the things that I want to touch on is anytime you're in the low and fast, you're using the foam. Anytime you're up high, you're using the heavy liquidy part of milk. So to be able to get low and fast, I really need to make sure I get rid of some of that heavy liquidy milk. Otherwise, it's just going to completely wash out my design. And the other way to pour a small latte art is to just practice and practice some more. I had a manager at one of the shops that I worked at that I couldn't pour macchiato to save my life. And she just had me do it 10 times in a row until I got it finally to get over that mental block. She would just say, it's just latte art, but smaller, as like a way to be helpful. And strangely it is, because I think we overthink it a bit. The same mechanics apply, but everything just happens much faster. You spend less time in the high and slow. You spend less time in the low and fast. You have less time to do everything. So it's like doing something in fast forward. But the movements are all the same. Cool, so let's see what else we have here. All right. How much does the quality of milk matter? I normally use the cheap gallon jugs of whole milk, but for today's class, I bought the expensive half-gallon carton. Does it matter? It does in a lot of ways, and in some ways it doesn't. So the taste matters a lot. So if you're pouring 12 ounces of milk into 2 ounces of espresso, it really matters that you enjoy the taste of that milk. All milk does not taste the same. It is not milk as one singular universal flavor. There's different dairies with different, practices, and you can taste the difference. The best way to find out if you like a milk is to taste them all side by side. Usually they'll sell those little small containers of milk at the grocery store, and that's a less expensive way to sample. You could also try steaming and see how much you enjoy steaming those milks. But in general, you'll be able to taste the quality difference quite a bit if you invest in a higher quality milk. But just because something costs $7 or $8 a half gallon doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be ideal for steaming either. So my only recommendation is I can't say is cheaper better than more expensive. It really comes down to your personal preference and then doing experiments and sampling side by side and deciding what you like to work with. But in general, organic, whole milk, higher quality does tend to taste better, in my opinion. All right. So any last minute tips on too small of a design? So if you're getting those tiny little miniature hearts, I think they're cute, but maybe not what you're looking for. You're looking for a design that's in the whole, that spreads into the whole cup. My guess is you're not sinking down to low and fast soon enough. So you're spending a lot of time up here and waiting for the cup to get super full, and then you're creating your design. The sooner you start the low and fast, the bigger your design will be. Also, the more aggressive and fast your angle of your pitcher, that's going to determine how quickly it flows out and kind of spreads and creates a huge design. So if I'm really tentative and I only have like a little bit of a trickle, it's going to be a very small, tiny design. So it's both sinking down as soon as you can, and then also tilting your pitcher forward to be a little bit more aggressive. The number one thing that I see with students is they'll stop right here and they'll think that that's going to be good for latte art. You have to get down into the cup. So that's for too small of a design, play with that flow rate. Try to see if you can encourage yourself to be a little bit more aggressive. It's hard because you're working with hot liquids and a cup that is quickly filling, and can be overwhelming. And a lot of times your brain kicks in, the like fight or flight brain, and it does things to try to protect you that can be really frustrating because you're trying a new design, where it says, no, I'm going to slow it down. And you keep thinking faster, I want to go faster, but you can't quite do it. The only way to overcome that is to continue practicing and to be very intentional about even faster than that, even faster than that. See if you can overflow the cup. See if you can go too fast, because once you know what too fast is, you can dial it back to just right. But if you're always just a little bit too tentative with your pour or your flow rate, you're going to have a hard time ever knowing what too fast looks like. So you really want to try to get in there. All right, let's see. Realistically, how long should it take to get good at the two designs that you covered today? Good is entirely subjective. I am a latte art enthusiast. I'm not a professional. I like my wonky pour. I call my pours wonky. They're not always super symmetrical. It's always kind of a surprise. It depends on your own definition of what good enough is. But to be able to consistently get a heart, I would say practicing 2 or 3 drinks a day for a week, you should be able to consistently get a heart if you're breaking down these steps using a good quality milk, steaming it properly. There's so many variables. I mean, everyone learns differently and everyone has different access to these things. And, you know, it's hard, you don't want to be wasteful. There are some tips and tricks for not wasting milk, which we haven't gone into too much, but they are out there on the internet. I would recommend checking out the Instagram at Wasting Coffee. There's a book associated with what you can do with your latte art leftovers and how to not waste coffee. Okay, cool. So now we are launching a poll. So this poll is, what educational offerings from Marzocco Home would you be most excited to see in the future? So this is, you know, we want to know. We create these things for you. We want it to be helpful for you. We want to do our best to share the information that we have. I see someone in the chat said all of the above. Yeah, I wish, but I mean, maybe we've got time, right now. So in some form or another, I would love to do educational offerings on each of these things. So let's see here. There's a lot of going back and forth. I see dialing in by roast level is currently winning. Advanced espresso theory, cool. And then a bunch of people saying yes, all. Awesome, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and then we'll share it here so we can see who did what. Okay, so ending the poll and sharing the results. So dialing in by a roast level, I would love to talk about that. That could be an experiment that we do. We're playing around with a choose your own adventure where you would get to choose my next move and I would, by majority consensus, and I would dial in based on the things that you were telling me to help you all problem solve what you think it is that I should do. I think that could be really fun. But really, we love putting these on. Thank you so much for answering all of those. I think that it would be great for us to be able to do any and all of that. So thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing. Perfect. Okay, so a few more questions. Let's see. So many good ones. I noticed you had the cup flat when you were high and fast. I think we covered that. At what level do you go low and fast? So that's something I kind of touched on in the video, but I want to make that clearer. So how soon you go down low and fast is determined by the level of your espresso in the cup and the design that you're going to pour. So if I'm going to pour a heart, that's a very simple design with a very simple shape, or I mean, it's mostly simple. You can make it super complex as you progress in your learning. And so I don't need to sink down as soon because I'm just making one shape. So for a heart specifically, I'm waiting till it gets about half full and then I'm sinking down. For a tulip or anything that's bigger or stretches across the surface of your cup, you want to sink down a little bit sooner because you're going to need more time to create that design. So it's really just maybe 1 or 2 seconds in the high and slow, and then sinking down to your low and fast and beginning your design. The sooner you start, like with the less full cup, the more aggressive the angle of your cup is going to have to be, because if it's going to be further down, and again, you need to get that spout super close to the surface. So if I'm going to pour a 10-tiered tulip or something crazy, or be ambitious, I'm going to have to pretty much do 1 second of just getting rid of some of the heavy milk and then a very aggressive pour. And then as it's getting more full, I'm sort of ratcheting it level. So that is a recommendation on that front. So great question there. And then let's do one more. So we don't have a home espresso machine, but want to start doing latte art. Is there a home milk steamer you recommend? I don't know of any brands of home milk steamers per se. I know there are lots of tips and tricks out there for getting steamed milk that can do latte art right now without having an espresso machine. One that I saw was heating your milk and then pouring it into a French press and then using the French press plunger to froth your milk, which I thought was super cool and super inventive. So there are those things out there. I'll see if I can gather a few resources for if you don't have an espresso machine, how to froth milk. And once you are able to get good foam and have it at a good temperature, pouring latte art, again, is just the mechanics. It's flow rate and physics and all kinds of good stuff. So, all right, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap up these classes, or at least this class today. I wanna thank you all so much for being here. I know you probably have even more questions. So if you wanna get hold of me, you can email me at leah@lamarzocco.com. And then my buddy/boss is dave@lamarzocco.com. We would love to answer your questions. I know a lot of them will be very specific to your own setup. So that's how I prefer to answer them, is what you're truly experiencing, so I can address that. And then also follow us on Instagram at lamarzoccohome.com, or at Marzocco Home, and then it's home.usa. Marzocco is the website. What is it? home.lamarzocousa.com. And that's where you can find more blog posts about latte art. You can also find chef steps videos demonstrating a different way to do the water technique, and then also our fine machines and future educational offerings. Again, be kind to yourself, have fun. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time out of your day, and I hope you're all safe, healthy, and well. Bye.